that is being offered, which is the education system, which you see on the top left, the bottom left. And look at what the market wants. Now, the fundamental dichotomy in the whole process is the third triangle, the right one, is the one which is going to recruit. So why would I want my student to learn something which the actual end user is not going to take? And that's the bridge that the vocational industry, and even today the higher education and the vocational industry is coming together to put together a formula which will help solve this problem, or at least mitigate this problem to a level of acceptance. If you look at the market demand, even take Africa. The future is going to be services. Much as I fully agree, agriculture will be the driving force, there are natural resources, all of it will take care of your growth at a particular percentage. If you want that to be galloping at a different hike, the markets have to transform to a services sector. And those services sector will typically be the banking, financial services, the telecom, and IT obviously being the governing slice which will take care of everything. This, again, it's a reiteration of what I spoke a little earlier. You have students being produced or graduating out of certain topics which are not relevant to what is required in the market. So there's obviously going to be a demand and a supply issue. And this also, what it does, in my opinion, is this puts your economy a little behind. Because even if a student is going to come back out of his graduation and understand, no, this is not what is required, and I have to go through a vocational program, what he's actually doing is he's investing his time, which may make him a employable graduate 1 year from the time he actually got graduated. So why can't it be converged? There's no compulsion for it to be sequential. It can be parallel, and that's the effort that has to go in from our perspective. Some unemployment rate of graduates, and even if we have to split India into different sectors, we also have some states which can talk of similar numbers. And the problems are similar, I believe, in some of the most advanced economies as well. So in India, this whole system is evolving. We see this evolution to be not only desirable, but also something which is compulsive from even our own economic growth standpoint. You see, all of a sudden, the management topics have taken center stage into how a services economy has to be grown, and there's a specialization. If you want to take into manufacturing industry, this is the specialization you take. If you want to be in the services industry, this is the specialization that you take. And if you want to be in the agro base, X is the specialization to be taken. So the theory of more and more out of less and less is getting practiced vis-a-vis a theory of less and less of more and more, which was the case in the past. It may be a good thing for all my African friends, especially, to take back some of the observations of the Indian education system. And with an element of pride and a great, a level of great passion, I would like to say that we have come a long way in the last 10 to 15 years. And all that it needs is some level of tweaking, a level of customization, flexibility at both ends, and the same thing can be implemented in Africa in not less than 1,000 days. If presuming there's a political, economic, all kinds of cooperation from our side. In the late 90s, it was a very different, education system. Today, we have about 96 institutions which are offering distance education. In the US, distance education share is about 33%. In India, it was point something about 5 years back. And today, it has already crossed the double digits. And what's happening is this level of education is also enhancing and encouraging people to get into accessible and affordable education. So that also has been a key growth driver from an education perspective. And we have been running, and we've been running very fast in this race of being a knowledge superpower. Now this is very interesting. 2009 to 2020, and we work very closely with the Planning Commission and all of them in terms of understanding, so that the idea is to align ourselves to what the future of the country is going to be. What I'm extremely impressed, and despite and in spite of the shortcomings that we have as a country, and probably will continue to have for some time, right? What I'm extremely proud is the emphasis that this whole sector has about education and training. There is a great commitment which talks about the gross enrollment ratio moving on from 14% to 30%. We are looking at more than doubling it in the next 10 years. And please remember, we are a very highly populated country. So the percentage may be doubling. We are talking about a voluminous level of people being educated and trained. And the infrastructure required for that is not going to be a kid's game. The institutions, we have universities. Currently, 525, 1,500 universities. And I can promise you, one out of that is going to be ours. Because privatization is allowed. Because you are free to come in and do what you can do to value add to the education system. And that has been a welcome move. And a lot of us today, from a traditional vocational training business, are now looking at moving on to the formal education business. The reason is very simple, because there is a need. The government has allowed privatization. And most of all, it's regulated but not controlled. That gives you phenomenal leg space and elbow room to operate within the predefined parameters of business, which I think is very good for a market which is as sensitive as education. If you can look at the last slide, private share. As you go out, you will see a lot of people, a lot of business groups have moving into education in a big way. This company, the company, my company at the moment, Scholar Point, is a joint venture between me and the Cement Kings of India. So people are all moving from different sectors into education. The reason is very simple. There is an opportunity, and besides everything else, it's considered to be a social business. You are socio-economic in that sense of the definition. And that gives us, besides the ability to earn money, also a phenomenal level of satisfaction that you've contributed back to the society. We have about 23,000 institutions with about 14 million students, which, by the way, is not great. For the level of population that we have, it has to further intensify. So for folks who are in this business, it's good time. And I must tell you, there's a lot of programs that the government is announcing now, which talks about, you don't have the money, we pay you, but get employed. The government has set up something called as the NSDC, the National Skills Development Council. And this particular council has been given a target to train about 500,000 people over the next year or 18 months or something of that sort. It's a target driven. They have an agenda to spend and to ensure that those students or those resources get jobs. We have about 39 central universities. Now we have different types of universities. You have central universities, you have state universities, you have deemed universities, you have private universities, and everyone is now running behind what suits them best. From a socio-economic perspective, people are all looking at the private university model, something that our company is also looking at. The number of colleges, vocational training institutes, in the vocational training space, IT has beaten the whole records of globally. The amount of students that are getting trained in the IT vocational training centers in the country is unparalleled to any other economy in the world. And that's one of the reasons why you see as the IT super kings. The point I'm trying to drive home is the next biggest wave as we see is the BFSI. Because of, to a great extent, the highest level of technology adoption by BFSI as a sector, what's happened is, though the students were getting trained in IT, but they were getting employed in the BFSI space. And today, BFSI, the banking system in the country has now further gone into a different level altogether. The government has announced something called as the financial inclusion policy, which compulsively mandates them to open about 4 rural branches for every city branch. So what it means is that if you want to make money in the city, you better serve the economy and go start 4 rural branches. Just imagine the level of jobs. So do a farmer's son today want to be a farmer? The answer is a loud no. But do a banker's son want to be a farmer? Probably the answer is yes. Because the grass is always greener on the other side. So these are some data points that we had. We are seeing an increasingly good trend. And I personally am a brand ambassador of Africa. The reason is, as I told you, extensively traveled, genuinely enthralled by the opportunity that it serves, and invested in Africa, made money in Africa, contributed to Africa, and why wouldn't we go deeper? Okay? One trend that we are observing is, India is now being looked up as the next alternative education hub. So earlier in the countries that we operated, we saw that there was a fancy footing towards UK or US, or as the case may be. Today, it may be worth extending your trip by a day. Just travel 3 hours down to Pune, okay, and have a look at the level of African students you will see. Fly down to Delhi. If 1 out of every 3 foreign national is not an African, I would bet myself on it. The point I'm trying to drive home is, sorry, you were saying something? Okay, thank you. So the point I'm trying to drive home is the student population or the student traffic towards India in terms of looking at India as an alternative hub, either for education tourism, or because of resource constraints, or because of the lure of the degree, or whatever it could be. It's increasing with time. In our view, these are points which are extremely interesting for us because this engages a relationship level beyond the normal between 2 countries or 2 continents. So we are looking at a further deeper leverage of that. India has its own advantages. Affordable. Compare the fees that you would pay in UK to what you would pay in India. And if any of you all have 2 children, okay, take my advice, send one to UK and send one to India. Let's meet after 20 years. I can promise you the one in India is probably going to be more successful if he's actually put in his efforts. The point is that the education system is far superior because it's complex and it forces you to learn. And there's a level of there's a level of passion that gets attached because of the fellow colleagues that you learn with. Today, once upon a time, the Indian education system did not have very high level of focus on infrastructure. The idea was always a good trainer. The idea was always learn. But today, you have wonderful infrastructure. There's a higher deployment of money. And consequently, you will see a very a renewed system that is in operation. I'm sure all of you all know the benefits of higher education. So I'll skip this slide, perhaps. Desired outlook. I'd like to take 2 minutes on this slide. What we are doing is, with our limited experience that we have had of these different markets in Africa, we have looked at 4 to 5 different levels of engagement that one can have with each other. My humble submission, if there are policymakers here, my humble submission, if there are business groups here, is let's look at the whole model on a 360-degree view and see what are those best points that can be taken, implemented, and probably collaborated. Let me address each one of them. As a high level of mistakes that we have done in our professional careers and in smaller companies, and we don't want you to do in your own companies. So likewise, in India, we have had multiple policies, some that has worked, some that has not worked. The idea is not for India to tell Africa what to do. The idea is to tell, look, this is what we have done, this worked, this did not work. In the context of your own country, in the context of your own challenges, you may be perhaps in a better position to address what will work and what will not. We propose a very deeper engagement, and in what form it's coming. One aspect that, I was told by Madam while we were just talking that, this is something that is getting addressed as early as about next month. One of the concepts that we are talking about is recognizing Indian universities abroad. We have operated in some of the markets. One of the common concerns that we have got is that if I'm applying for a government job, I don't see a recognition of this particular industry, of this particular degree. That becomes a sort of a stumbling block for students to address. Distance education recognition is something which sooner than later most countries are going to do. In our opinion, the earlier any of the country has to adopt it, it's going to be giving better value proposition. And especially for countries which are in the growing stage like India, like Africa, in our opinion, whenever there's an infrastructural strength, we all should remember that we are living in an age where global boundaries are only getting thinner and thinner by the day. And technology is playing a serious intervention. And as said, make India the alternative official destination. Content participation. What is India's biggest strength? Content. You name, Sir spoke about cotton. Google it, you will find 2 institutions. The whole idea, as he said, would be to take it from level 1 to level 10 and institutionalize the whole concept as compared to keeping it sporadic. The point I'm trying to drive home is, this is a content-rich country. You name the content, you will find the best players in this market. The reason is very simple, that the markets are fragmented, hence you will find sporadic players in different parts of the country. So Looking at Indian participation, you may not use an Indian brand. You may choose to give it an African flavor. Do whatever suits, take the content. There's no point in rebuilding the whole thing. Get into what we call as content collaborations. Get the best vocational training brands. IT has been successful. The next wave, telecom. The next wave, BFSI. Infrastructure. There are a lot of vocational training programs on all these aspects. So, in our opinion, the best country is the one. If you look at what Middle East has done, they've looked at what are the best practices in US. They've got the whole thing implemented in. And that's one of the reasons why, from an availability perspective and affordability perspective, Middle East is always generally on that particular radar. The point is, you can have these kind of participations with India. And the way we have been, I believe there's a presentation on medical tourism. We have been talking about education tourism in a big way. You know, believe me, we have had experience of our students going to Africa and learning those cultural aspects and coming back. Those numbers may be few, but we took the first few initial baby steps. Likewise, what we are saying is, it could be a good thing to inculcate about 3 months of training into your academic programs for students who wish to come to India and explore the, the economic opportunities that is here. Once upon a time in US, India was considered as a punishment posting. But today it's a premium posting, right? Everyone wants to be a part of the rising sun. Technology participation. We have investments in 2 companies which have, there are certain topics in India which are very, very premium. And to find one guy itself is difficult. So if you're talking about training 500 different locations and having 500 such trainers, you're talking about dilution of quality. But today, technology has advanced so much that we have set up studios.